Hello there.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
All right, not too bad. Bit tired, but life's insane. So it's hardly surprising, really.
It is, yes. I think it's the what is it? Is it the eclipse? Is it the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction?
Apparently, this is all playing its
It's
part. I keep an open mind at this stage because I don't have all the answers. Um, but yeah, if that stuff is to be believed, we're being, attacked with solar flares and all sorts of stuff going on, which is having an impact on,
yeah.
our electromagnetic field. So I don't claim to know the answers, but it's certainly fascinating.
Well, um, most governments have an astrologer.
Yeah.
So there's something. I remember thinking about this years ago. Um, if the magnetic pull of the moon can have an effect on the psyche, hence lunatic, right? That can have an effect on people, then the planets are emitting more powerful electromagnetic um, frequencies. And from my time in music, the electroacoustics of music, which I studied, is part of my course. Then the frequencies of music, just music alone, can alter the personality. So if you're getting into electromagnetics, then that's more profound. But if you think each heavenly body emits a different electromagnetic frequency, which would have a different personality effect, then this would explain how the personalities can broadly, not distinctly, but broadly characterized into the different times of the year, depending on where the bodies are. And it wasn't that astrology was made to fit a preconceived notion, it was built out of observances over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, where they observed and they recorded and they observed and recorded and observed. And these were passed down in oral traditions. So we've got um, records of astrological data going back to 7,000 years ago, where they were beginning to formulate all of this knowledge. But they said they were taught this knowledge by other people. So I think there's definitely something to it, or governments and billionaires wouldn't use them.
As a woman, I can 100% confirm the lunar cycle affects my cycle and my moods, and the same with my daughters. And a number of females I've spoken to who confirm this. So I'm in no doubt there's something to it. I don't fully understand it, but I keep I keep an eye on it. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting time to be alive, that's for sure. I wouldn't miss it for the world.
What's that? It's that Buddhist insult, doesn't it? May you live in interesting times,
Yeah.
which I think we are, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's historical. I keep explaining to my children this is as much as we perceive the Clash of the Titans as a distant myth, and we're starting to perceive even Christ as a distant myth, then so will future generations perceive this period of time as a myth. I don't think they'll believe that it was as bad as it is. And I think everyone's been slowly conditioned into such a degree that uh, they can't see the madness.
I had a joyous moment this morning. I'm on a lot of long COVID Facebook groups, have been for some time, and I don't tend to comment anymore because when I try to put helpful information in there, I got attacked. So whatever. But I have kept an eye because I like to see how things change, how language is shifting to suit how people want to communicate their feelings. And what I have seen, particularly this morning and more so over the last few weeks, is the amount of people in these groups who were very much bought into the jab are now going, oh, it's time for a next lot of boosters. I'm not having one. I'm not having one. And they're now coming out and saying, no, that these jabs have caused us problems. Now, this is the first time I've seen numbers doing this, proper numbers. You've had the odd person putting their head up and saying it, but now we're seeing numbers. And it's gives me joy in the respect that they know now they're not going back for more. And these were people who were very, very pro-jab, even, you know, when they were going through horrific injuries, they're very pro-jab. And what else is warming is so many in those groups now for about the last 6 months have been suggesting ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine as potential solutions. And again, these were the people who did that
bleach.
horse dewormer. You know, these are the same groups of people who were throwing that crap out there. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still those on there that are pushing back, but to see the ratio shifting as much as it has in literally recent weeks gives me joy that more people are realizing and aren't going to go back for another one. And I've been just pushing the protocol out there, and most people ignore it, or they seemingly ignore it. But yeah, we are shifting. We are shifting. It's massive. I can feel it. It's, you know, like I said to you before, I've been watching this over 20 years. I know when I'm seeing a shift, and I follow this stuff very, very closely. And I'm absolutely no doubt that we've had a second wave of awakening, if you like, over the last month or so. And I think there'll be a third one coming relatively soon. But I'm an eternal optimist, or as Mark Atwood would say, I'm a pocket-optimist, because I absolutely love what I'm seeing at the moment. It brings me real joy to watch the world wake up. However rocky that is, tough shit, it's got to happen.
It's an act of compassion. I don't think people get, you know, you read the book of Revelation and it says only 100,000 people make it through. My understanding is that things are different. I genuinely think that, like, the creator has put his hand in the affairs, and it is, I've always said it's not a question of if, it's a question of how many. How many people are going to make through this period of history. And I think it's going to be down to perception of reality. And because what is beginning to happen is people don't have the ability to tell good from evil anymore. So let's just take a simple choice. You can go back as early as the Chinese government are brutal and horrible, and they, you know, persecute their own people to ridiculous degrees, like worse than Stalin, worse than anything that happened in World War II. You know, we still have people in the West who laud the Chinese government. They can't even tell that basic thing there. That's the most basic point. Evil or not evil. You got innocent people or a really horrendous beast of a government. Because Mao took Leninism, Marxism, and kind of injected it with steroids and warped and deformed it even further. You know, let's just take that. Then we can fast forward to 2020, and it's like a rigged election, not rigged election. So we're being given another choice, right? And then you go locked in your home, not locked in your home. Then you go forced to take a jab, not forced to take a jab. Then you're going abortion until after birth or not. And then, you know, euthanist because you're depressed, or get outside and get some exercise. And you can see that the choices are getting wider and wider and wider. I don't think people can tell what's happening is actually this. And there's a divergence occurring. And it's like, are you going to choose the highway to hell or the highway to heaven? And I think they'll get to a point where, and this is why everything's being pushed as it is, it's like only the greatest of fools will not see what's happening, because they'll get to a point where that chasm is too far to be able to make the leap. And it is like a brain rot for those who can't acknowledge it. And I think that's what we're seeing happening. And it's like at times you just want to scream, like you need to open your eyes and see what's going on. And it is almost like everything is being pushed to the surface so people can see. I think it's an act of compassion. I genuinely do, as difficult as it is, because rooting out the cancer.
You can't tell people, you've got to show people.
Yeah.
And we're watching that roll out right now, and people have got a choice to make. It is literally as simple as that at this stage. You're working for good or you're working for evil. And there isn't, whilst there's a gazillion shades of grey in terms of the awakening process and where people are and what kind of line they've gone down, and everyone's got a different angle that they kind of get triggered by, if you like, igniting that part of the awakening first. And there's a gazillion shades of grey in the middle. But the ultimate that it comes down to is, are you on the side of good or are you on the side of evil? That is the bottom line. There isn't, I don't think, anything else outside of that. And people are now being pushed to a precipice to make a choice. And it's only when they're on the verge of that precipice that they will then think about accepting change, because we as human beings aren't particularly good at accepting change. We don't like change, but we certainly can't carry on with the status quo. And that's what's being unraveled now. We're showing people the status quo isn't going to be the way forward. It's not happening. And what is very beautiful, and not enough people even recognize this. So within the awakening movement, there are, I don't want to say factions because that's such a negative word, but there's certainly groups and different levels of belief and different levels of faith and different levels of what people are prepared to open their mind up to. And then there's different people who will take action. Some will, some won't, some do, and it's varying degrees of action. What has happened, and it's like even people who are within the awake movement, let's say, have no idea just how many of us are living in a way where we're bit by bit removing ourselves from the system, and we're creating new ways forward. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of us, if not millions of us now, across the world who aren't even really looking at the kind of, if you like, current 3D stuff. I mean, I keep an eye on it, but nothing like I did even a year ago, 6 months ago, because where we put our energy is very, very important. And I no longer want to spend huge amounts of energy on watching the old crumble. It has to crumble. It is crumbling. It's on its way. I personally choose to lead by example in my own life by extracting myself from this current system as much as I possibly can. And I'm going through another next level of my own awakening in terms of what I'm prepared to give my energy to. And I almost don't give a shit anymore about the old crumbling. It's fascinating watching how I've shifted and changed over recent months. And I've become so aware of my own vibration, my own frequency that I'm putting out there is, do I sit in this space any longer than absolutely necessary where there is so much negativity? And we know that negativity has to be shown. Don't get me wrong, I'm not critiquing that. But I've been in that space 20 odd years. I'm not going to hang out there anymore. I'm going to put myself in a space where we get on and we build the new and we talk about what comes next. And it's not just the happening. It's not just what we're making happen in a very practical sense. It's also what's happening in an emotional and spiritual sense. And for me, it's the night before the eclipse, and bearing in mind all that stuff, I keep a very open mind on. I don't necessarily lean in a particular direction with it because I haven't made my mind up. But I certainly will keep an open mind and absorb it and take it on board. But the night before the eclipse, I was sat doing what I call my usual Sunday night thing, which is almost like a meditative prayer thing. And I shut down all noise. I maybe have a candle on, but I just sit and I'm at peace and I just let things come in, come out, flow through me. It's a time I connect with God. And some people get it and some people don't. And, you know, either way, I don't really care. I get a lot out of it. And I got this really strong messaging. It was quite powerful. And if I was a crier, I probably would have cried, quite honestly. It was quite emotional. And it was almost this messaging saying, don't worry, you can step back into your feminine energy. I've been in my masculine energy for many, many years because being a single parent with 3 kids, I had to face up some really tough stuff. Life was not easy. No money, being awake and alone in the world with 3 small children, you've got to find a way to get yourself up and get yourself through that. And so I kind of adopted my masculine energy to do that. And then when you're trying to wake the world up and you're getting abuse, again, you know, now it doesn't even faze me at all. Hasn't done for a number of years, but it did to start with. It was very impactful to start with. And again, I adopted my masculine energy to deal with that. And then coming into battle in 2020, full armor on, and I used my masculine energy to push through and create energy that I needed to see happen in order for us to bring forward solutions. But again, I took a lot of abuse, a lot of hassle, and I kind of allowed my masculine energy to take control. So when I got this messaging come through, it was really powerful, came out of nowhere. And it was, you can step back into your feminine energy now. You can be who you want to be. You can start living your life the way you want to live your life. And it was so strong, it made me realize that with joy, I don't have to worry about any of the 3D stuff anymore. I don't. It's almost done and dusted. I believe what we're seeing roll out now is being done for the sake of the normies, if I'm perfectly honest. And a lot of people disagree with me on that. But I've been watching it a long time, and you pick up on signals, and being autistic, I pick up on certain patterns and so on and so forth. So I've absolutely over the moon with the way things are going. Now, do I spend my time waiting for everyone to wake up? Because we are waiting for people to wake up, let's be honest. I think that's one of the reasons we haven't seen more direct action. We're waiting for the people to wake up.
Yeah.
Now, do I sit on my laurels and achieve nothing whilst I'm waiting for people to wake up and just sit on Twitter and complain about things? Or do I get off my arse and actually make things happen for what comes next? Things will shift, things will change. Society is going to start looking really, really different. And we can either allow that to be told to us by new power structures, new centralized systems, whatever it is that, if people don't do something, will stay in place. Or do we get on and create it how we want to see the world shift and change? And I'm very much about, let's be proactive, let's make it shift and change how we want to see things happen. And that's very much a big start on decentralization. So I'm very focused on the new right now. And what it does do is bring a lot of joy, a lot of pleasure, a lot of positivity, vibrations and frequency of the people within these groups. The energy is so high and so positive, that for those out there who are kind of really getting sick and tired of waiting for people to wake up, or waiting for justice, or waiting for action, you can sit there and you can sit in that space and you can do that, but what are you actually achieving? Why not get off your butt and start building anew? And whilst there's thousands of us out here doing it, and it is wonderful, I would ask people to question themselves. If you're not, why not?
If you're standing still, you're moving backwards.
Yeah. And do we want to allow a space, even if the good guys come into play and take on government and so forth, and we have a transitionary government, which personally I think we do need to do in order to decentralize the systems and bring about tribunals and all the rest of it. Are you going to allow those? Have we learned nothing? Are we going to allow those people to dictate what things look like moving forward, or actually are we going to take control and step up to our civic responsibilities and help create the world a better place for our children? Because I sure as hell ain't going to trust anyone who comes into central government to do 100% proper job. I don't. I'd rather deal with it myself.
I think, to borrow a phrase from the guys in the Anglosphere, we're creating the new Knights of the Realm. I think that's what's happening. So. Well, look, we've jumped straight in. Why
Sorry.
don't we start? No, that's fine. I kind of had a feeling we would. So, for those who don't know you, who are you?
So my name's Katherine McBean. I've been on this journey for actual decades now at this point. I'm a single parent. I have spent many, many years looking for solutions, knowing or hoping and praying we would reach a point where everyone would start waking up. So for me, 2020 was actually a really positive year, as awful as it sounds. If we didn't wake up at that point, who knows where we would have ended up. So I've spent my years and years trying to figure out what are the solutions moving forward. I think I've hit the nail on the head with the solutions we're bringing to the fore now. And I'm absolutely over the moon that the world is waking up. We've sidestepped a landmine. We have. I know it seems like we probably haven't with the jabs and so forth, but we have sidestepped a landmine. Things would have been a whole lot worse if this hadn't have happened. And I'm absolutely over the moon as we build the new world.
Yeah. So I knew you through, was it the People's Farming Alliance?
So the People's Health Alliance or the People's Food and Farming Alliance, probably.
Yeah. So I think it was the People's Food and Farming Alliance. Then I realized that you were involved with the People's Health Alliance. And how did you get there? You mentioned on one of your webinars that you had a background in the purchasing industry for supermarkets. Is that correct?
So I worked in business development. I mean, that's fundamentally what I did. And I was sent off to lots and lots of different businesses to make stuff happen. And I ended up working within the grocery sector for a while. And that's when I came across the supermarkets and how they were treating small local producers. And this is over 20 years ago. And their conduct set off alarm bells for me. So I went and worked undercover within the agricultural industry for several years to see if my concerns were valid. Turns out they were. And since then, I've been trying to put solutions in place, but timing is key with everything that's happening at the moment. And once we hit 2020, I knew the time was coming to start unleashing these solutions on the world, and that's exactly what we did.
So I've had a concern about farmers for a long time. So I grew up in a small village on the edge of a small town in northern England. And if you walked out of my front door and you looked left, there was pretty much nothing except Berwick until you go to Edinburgh, right? So I grew up kind of on the edge of the countryside. I grew up trying to poach fish, dodging poachers' traps, and all this sort of thing. Making bows and arrows, climbing trees, swimming in the rivers, and so I was aware of the seasons. I was aware of farming as a way of life. Had hot rice shot at me. I've been chased by tractors and all sorts of things. So it just, that rural essence of, well, this is how life works, was just normal. And I do remember when I first moved into the city, Newcastle, that the lack of visible change in the seasonings was disconcerting. I really didn't like it. So I'm aware of how important farming is for the country, not just the rural, but actually everything. I don't think people realize that actually, if your farming industry, forget the City of London, that's built once you've got the infrastructure of being able to feed your populace. Once you have that, you can then work freely in other industries to allow things like the city and the stock market to come about. But if you don't have that sorted, you can forget it. And like a lot of people, you see that the farms are struggling, and you go, this isn't right. But if you're outside of that, and I think this is where Clarkson's done a very good thing. If you're outside of that, you don't understand how not only the regulation, but how the essentially almost mafioso type tactics of the supermarkets is killing the farming industry. And when you just take a cursory look at the figures and the purchase prices against the cost price of production, it's like, this is criminal. What was it that you began to find in your undercover exploration that kind of, because a light bulb kind of went off, and you have developed strategies, but it must have been quite a big thing that you saw that made you realize, hang on, this needs to change.
So I worked in a number of capacities with a number of different areas of agriculture, and what I was seeing can be really pinned down to one major issue overall, and that was the centralization of everything, be that biosecurity, be that fodder, be that the seed industry, be that the chemical industry, be that all of it, what you were watching, even down to buying groups, what you were watching over a number of years, or what I was certainly watching, was again, the smaller were getting knocked out in the marketplace by the bigger. And the supermarkets were connecting up with everything, and they were having a say on everything. So when I was working, for example, in biosecurity, I actually got to work at one point for a company who was selling very natural products, and that kind of resonated with me a lot more than the chemical products. And I was quite happy to work on that one. But what I did was connected up with a number of the supermarkets to get them to roll this out across their farms. And it became, well, I started off trying to contact farmers, and all of them were saying, oh, you'll need to speak to Morrison's, or you'll need to speak to Asda, or you'll need to speak to Tesco. And I thought, where are the days where a farmer gets to decide this stuff on his own farm? And so you can look at that from any point of view, be that seed, be that feed, be that, like I say, the fodder crops, be that any of it. It was this centralization, this powerful centralization, and it was done by stealth. It wasn't overnight. It was done over a number of years. And the supermarkets and DEFRA were always at the helm, always at the helm. And so the monopolization of the entire agricultural industry became very apparent. And to me, it didn't take long to figure out that was what the problem was. And so I moved straight on to what are the solutions. But I took the opportunity to go and work with rearers, with farmers themselves, be it through dairy, pork, beef, whatever it might have been. I spoke with gamekeepers. I worked within the game industry quite heavily, which is relatively repulsive, actually. I went and looked at intensive poultry farm units, and there comes to a point where compassion actually comes into this. So it's not just the compassion for the human either. I mean, I've seen farmers really struggling for a number of years. It's been building and building and building, but not enough people were aware. So thank God the European farmers stood up, because that's really put it on everyone's radar. But it was also the animals. I understand a need for livestock and poultry and so on, and a fantastic service they can give to us all outside of just their meat. Was how I went to an intensive chicken farm one day. How I didn't burst into tears when I was there, I do not know. It was beautifully clean. It was so clean, it was ridiculous. There were massive poultry houses with a lot of birds crammed in there, and they had access to very clean water. Their environment was very clean. But what I had to do is put on a biohazard suit to step inside this, and the full boots, the lot, to step inside this poultry unit. That was my first red flag. Having kept poultry for a number of years, and I'd cuddle my chickens and they'd come in the kitchen, and I never ever put on gloves unless I thought one of my birds was ill. Never. And I went inside, and there was all these very clean looking chickens just stood there. They just stood there, no natural light. It was all artificial lighting. There was a temperature gauge to keep it a beautiful temperature for them. The feeders and drinkers, you couldn't have grumbled for a second. They were off the floor. They were beautifully clean. But these birds just stood there. We have taken away every single natural environment in poultry units such as this. We've taken away every single natural environment that poultry should be living in. And as a result of that, they have absolutely no idea what their natural way of living is. We've taken that away from them. I want to see hens pecking around, scratching around on the ground, talking to each other, ruffling their little feathers. These things just stood like zombies, David, absolute zombies. And it became apparently clear to me over the following years, and seeing this more intensive approach to farming, just how much we are damaging or limiting or taking away a natural environment for animals. Like I say, I'm not someone who believes animals should be out of the agricultural system. Far from it. Far from it. But we can create an agricultural environment where those animals can live in their natural capacity and natural environment, where they're actually aiding the return of health to our soil, return of health to our environment, and doing what they do best. And for anyone out there who thinks this intensive farming is the way forward, I'm afraid you're completely wrong. But the supermarkets would love to go that way. The fact that we're a country who are incredibly compassionate towards our animals is the only reason you see any cows or sheep or anything in the fields, is because they know the British public would kick off. And if people understood or went and visited these intensive farming units, they'd be closed down tomorrow. They would be closed down tomorrow, because we're a country of animal lovers.
Yeah, I think it's horrible. I think it affects the meat as well. And I think if you, I mean, there's a whole debate, if the animal's stressed at slaughter, then the quality of the meat, it tastes horrible, actually. And I think we have yet to realize that there are layers beyond the molecular that nourish us. And if the animal isn't kept in the right condition, it affects us on a different level. We need to go back to living with dignity, and that includes even your animals should have whatever dignity that they're supposed to have. And it's gone too far. But the other thing is the centralization. A lot of people don't realize that the centralization of everything is communism. It's what it is. And we are approaching communism by stealth. And I would argue that a lot of the people who are running the government at the minute have such a low education awareness level that they don't even know that. But the centralization of the farming industry is one of the planks of communism. And it's already happened here. And you can see the effect. It's like, because once they can control the food production, they control the population. And they're trying to do it. And this is why they've dumbed down the education, so that people don't spot it. You can't execute a plan like that against a sovereign people. This wouldn't have happened in England even 50 years ago, let alone 100. Because there would have been, the mob would have been on the street. The English have a history of, when it gets too tough, the mob gets on the street. We have I don't know if it's a proud history of, we have a serious disagreement with the monarch. It's 5,000 men aside in a field till someone loses a head. And that's the way we solve things in England. It's the English system is the first among equals. It's not the divine rule of monarch that the Europeans have. It's a first among equals system. And I think they mistake our ignorance and our tolerance for weakness. And I think that's dangerous. I think that's very, very dangerous, because when the English mobilize, when the English go to war, they do it better than everybody. So
this is what I said to you the other day, I think, when we were talking, is, the lion might be slow to rise, but when it does, there's no stopping it.
Yeah.
And I believe that we are heading far closer and closer to that point. But we do need the numbers. We do need those to be proactive. But this is why I keep harping back to, until that point, we reach that point, we can't sit on our laurels. We can't just do nothing. We're achieving very little compared to what we could achieve if everyone pushed in the same direction. If everyone got off their butts who was awake and became proactive at community level in building the new, it'd be done. Because what people don't realize is, if you stop paying taxes, if you withdraw from their system, if you build your own and work within that, you make them redundant. They become pointless. They have no power. And we haven't had to raise a fist in violence. And don't get me wrong, I think it is going to potentially come. But we can get on with removing their power now. We can get on and make that happen by decentralizing these power structures. The sooner everyone realizes that, the better, because we are doing it. I mean, we are doing it. It's naturally and organically happening. We are taking away their power, but we could do it a heck of a lot quicker if everyone got involved.
I think this is the apathy. So let's have a think. I'm somebody who circumvented society a long time ago. I just went, hang on, I don't like this, and just sidestepped it and went on a completely different thing. And I didn't even use Google till about 2008. I don't think I had an email address till the early 2000s. I just wasn't interested in all of that.
Yeah.
This is all quite,
Same.
and I've only really been interested in Twitter recently, the last few years, really. I did have a Twitter account, but that was more so I could get direct information from the White House rather than filtering it through the BBC. That's all I used it for. And it's only really been the last 18 months I've kind of actually interacted in any degree on it. And the one thing I've kind of asked everybody is like, yes, 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 but what do we do? What do we do? Like, how do we get out of this? And nobody really has any ideas, right? Everyone's like, well, this is a problem and we need to decentralize this and do this. And it's like, okay, that's great, but that's not an actual plan. And I think when you did that webinar with the farming guy and you had all these different people come on to talk about community hubs, ways to use legislation against them, but it's like you don't attack the local council, you use the legislation to say, look, we're doing this on this basis. And there's legislation there to allow us to go forward and create new working models. That was the first time I'd seen anything of any industry of how we move. Even Farage isn't offering a way forward. He's just saying it has to change, but he's not saying how. Nobody is, Reform aren't. They've got good sound bites. This is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, and we plan to do this, 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 and this. But if you ask them how, there's nothing there. So nobody knows how, because what we need to do is return the sovereignty to the individuals. So that's one issue. And the second issue is, I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking we're at the point now of about between 5 and 2 years pre-Magna Carta. That's where we are. If history is going to repeat, that's where we are right now. And I thought, well, who are the barons? Who are the lords? And I thought, it's going to be the Tim Martins of this world. It's going to be the business sector who just say, right, we're going to stop paying employee tax. Until you fix this, we're just not going to pay tax. You can screw it. We'll pay our wages and we'll pay our staff, but we're not paying you. And like I work with a family-run business. I've been self-employed for DMA since I was about 22, 23. And you now get taxed, you now have to pay the government for the privilege of paying your employees. It's mental. And I do think we are at a point where taxes will be withheld, whether it's council tax or employee tax. But I also think that there has to be a returning of sovereignty, because Parliament isn't sovereign. This is the thing that nobody understands, because since the 50s, they've set a lot of precedent. The monarch stepped back, and look, I think Queen Elizabeth was a lovely figurehead, but she was a very ineffective monarch. If you look at the level of bills that her father, her grandfather, her great-great-grandfather stopped because they weren't in the interest of the people, she didn't stop a thing. She let every bill go, and it's been the greatest erosion of the sovereign power of the English people since the Magna Carta. And that's just probably because they told her, you don't have to worry, you don't have to worry. And now we effectively have just figureheads. They're nothing, but they actually have a huge, they are our representative. They are a representative of our sovereignty. That's what they are, right? They are the figurehead of the sovereignty of the people. And it's no one studies the Magna Carta, no one studies the Articles of Common Law, which are the basis of natural law, English law. And Parliament is not sovereign. The Parliament, the Prime Minister, is the first administrator of the state to the king, to the monarch. They are not the sovereign power. They do not have the sovereign right to do what they're doing. But nobody understands the law enough, or even the history of how the law evolved, to be able to challenge them. And I think we need to understand that actually England is a nation of kings. The English are all sovereign. This is the point. This predates Christianity, right? This predates Alfred. This goes back to like Germany, because Caesar picked up on the same thing with the Germanics. They had a first among equals system, but each man was his own sovereign being. And you can see that in the English. And this is gone. So we need this devolution of power so we can push back things to the people. But what is missing is the mechanism for how. And that's what excited me about that webinar that you gave a couple of months ago. And I did think I need to put this into some sort of AI word lifter and make a document, because you could replicate this across every single factor and just say, change the industry, do this, do this, do this, do this, because there is law there to support you just circumventing things.
Yeah. I mean, we're doing the same. I've teamed up with somebody else now. We've just launched it on my podcast this week. We've got models for how businesses, enterprises can move forward and change how they function enough that we can move into a new space. And again, it is that decentralization. We've got to cover everything, from local politics through to education, through to local economies. And the food side is a great way forward, because A, it affects everybody, and B, so many people can get involved. You don't necessarily have to be a specialist in anything. But what I would love to see is other initiatives popping up. I mean, there are a few, but I'd love to see a whole lot more initiatives popping up that support this decentralization. Education, something I'm gunning for. I just got to find the time and energy to do that one as well. And I think this is the point, is there are ultimately a handful of people driving this. Ultimately a handful of people, and the people out there, you've got to decide what you want your country to look like. What sort of country do you want to live in? And are you going to leave it up to new centralized power structures to decide what that looks like for you again? Or are you going to take the lessons we've learned over the last 4 years and all step up and get involved in making sure we create something which is so much better than what we've had in recent years, and for decades now, so much better? And I believe we've all got a civic responsibility to do this. I think we've got moral responsibility to do this, particularly if you've got children. Really think about what world you want them to sort of grow up in now. And for those young people who have been conscious of the last 4 years, we've got a lot of mental health issues to contend with out there. We've got a lot of problems, and so it's down to us. It is down to us. We've got this responsibility. We have to step forward. If you think for a minute someone on a white charger is coming in and they're going to save the day, I think you're very much mistaken. It isn't down to somebody else to rescue us. It isn't down to somebody else to save us. It's down to us to do it. And the thing is, none of this is actually convoluted. None of this is difficult. None of it's hard work, and it takes a lot of determination, but none of this is complex. We can all get involved and we can all do it. And with the food and farming and getting community hubs off the ground and health hubs even off the ground, we are supplying solutions for people to want to step away. What I'm seeing at the moment, very interestingly, is a division even within the freedom movement. Those that want to remain in the 3D, those that want to move more into the 5D. And I use that terminology because it's quite easy for people to grasp. Don't necessarily like it, but people can grasp it. So there's bunches of us moving into the 5D, and we're just waving goodbye to the 3D. We don't want to play anymore. We're not interested. We don't want to be a part of your circus. And if you guys want to sit around and wait for something to happen, you crack on. You do that. We're not. We're going to get on with it. And more and more each day are joining that journey. They're coming over to the 5D. They're bored with what's going on. Yeah, call me when something happens. That's fine. but we're moving on and getting on with it. And I just want people to start thinking about that is, do you want to leave this down to some small elite centralized group to decide how we kind of heal and move forward from here? Or do we, the people, want to step up and do that? And it's over the people. They get to decide this.
Yeah. I think it has to come from the people. Because the powers that be aren't going to do it. They're just not enlightened enough. And I think it is a process of enlightenment. I mean, I don't. There are very few terms you can use, and the 3D, 5D term has been kind of adopted. But it's almost like, yeah, serfdom or sovereignty. You know, which one do you want? And are you going to be responsible? Or are you going to abdicate your responsibility to somebody else? Ultimately, you have to be the master of your own destiny. You are a sovereign. You are a sovereign being. So you have to be in control of where you're going. I've described you a number of occasions as a force of nature. You just seem to be everywhere at once, doing a lot of things, and you seem to have inexhaustible supplies of energy. Number one, have you always been like that? Number two, they use the term red pill, which I think has been co-opted by a very strange group of men recently. But it's, it comes from the Matrix thing of just, when did you kind of realize, hang on, there is a shadowy hand in the world that I need to rail against. What was it that got you to that realization? Because everyone has a different thing.
Trigger, yeah, absolutely. So when my thing was that grocery thing, was in terms of made me start questioning things. And very quickly, I mean, doing research back then looked very different to how we do research now, because it wasn't all on the internet. I had to literally do legwork on it. And I discovered Monsanto. And I think everyone's probably heard of Monsanto now. They've done that rabbit hole. But years ago, I remember just looking at it and I was thinking, hang on a minute. The people that run this are the same people who do that, and then they're the people who do that, and and you start connecting. It's the same old story. You start connecting the dots up, and then I stumbled across a guy. I was really down my Monsanto rabbit hole at the time, and it took me a lot longer to wake up than it probably does with people now, because again, access to information was very, very different back in those days. And I stumbled across a guy who was talking about his geoengineering stuff. And there was a missing part for me. At that point, I still thought the climate change thing was probably real, but I felt something was missing, and he came in and he plugged that gap for me. And once he did that, I then started looking at a lot of other stuff, and everything interconnected. Usual story, not particularly exciting, but that's what triggered it. That's what got me moving on things. And in terms of the energy, if I've always been this way, I've always pushed back. My mum from senior school, I wasn't so bad at primary school, I don't think. I was a bit more insecure then to raise my voice. I was a small child. But I do recall my mum saying, please, Catherine, can you just keep your mouth shut for 5 minutes? Because even in class, there was a couple of teachers who were a bit bullish towards students, and guess who raised their voice and said, hang on a minute, you don't get to behave that way. And if I disagreed with teachers, I'd often voice that. I have always had this real bug about injustice. When people aren't treated equally, when people aren't treated fairly, when like when you saw a teacher targeting a couple of pupils and things, that really got my goat, and I could not keep my mouth shut. I had to say something. So I've always had this need for balance and justice, and that's always been there. But it's only, I think, as I've got older that I've become a lot more brave, a lot more courageous. And I think learning from a very young age to not give a shit what anyone thought about me, as long as I felt I was being fair, and I was showing humility and compassion and empathy. And if I felt that I was in a position where I was right, I don't give a shit what other people say about me. And that is one of the most freeing feelings in the world. The minute you stop giving a shit what Mr. and Mrs. Jones think about you, or anyone else for that point, if you're stood in your integrity, you don't need to worry about what anyone else thinks about you, because it doesn't matter. So I felt very grateful from a young age to learn that, and I've been teaching my children that, don't get me wrong, if I'm being a dick, I need someone to tell me I'm being a dick. That's absolutely fine, and I'll take it on the chin. But fundamentally, no, stop caring what other people think. Do what is right. Do what feels right to you. Stand in your integrity and do it. And that learning that was the biggest thing ever, because then I could just raise my voice and I could just fly at things, and I didn't give a shit what anyone thought of me.
Yeah, I think The sense of injustice. I don't know if it's an English thing, but the English were always famed for the sense of fair play.
Yeah.
You know, and I think
It's
this
just
is,
not cricket. That's one
yeah,
of my
yeah,
expressions,
yeah,
and they do think it's just not cricket.
yeah. And I think that's where the racism thing never flew with me, because I thought actually the English don't really care as long as you're decent and you're good, and you're good at what you do. We'll champion you. We love a champion.
Yeah.
Like we're not
Yeah.
bothered where you come from. We just love a champion, and we love a decent individual. And it's like he's a good fellow, you know. And I think we have a history. If anyone read history properly, they'd see that that was the case. And yeah, I do think it's like an English thing. I often feel that it's the sword of justice. You have to, and it's holding on to those ideals. I think I was incredibly idealistic as a young man, to the point that I think I must have been a nightmare for employers, because if I found someone didn't have high ideals and high morals, I couldn't work for them. Like I would just lose respect for them immediately. And it's just like, right, I can't. I need you to have either my understanding or greater for me to be able to work for you. And as I've got older, I've learned to kind of just not let go of the ideals, but find practical ways to. Because I went through a lot of jobs, when you got kids, you can't do that, can you? But yeah, I think we need that though. We need people who have that, and they generally are the ones who begin to shape and push things. They're not necessarily recorded in the annals of history, and I don't think we do it for that reason. But they are the ones who kind of widen the path for others to come through. There has to be like a
Yeah.
precursor, right? And I think that's kind of what we're seeing at the moment is there is a groundwork being laid, and the generation behind us, probably Generation Z, will go on to achieve great things as a result. I think the millennial generation have it incredibly tough. I think they're going to find it difficult to come back from that ideological position they've been pushed into. Even though it's painful for them when they're there, they don't want to be there because their lives are full of angst and misery and loneliness. But I think they're going to struggle to come out of that. Whereas the Generation Z seem to be looking at it and going, wow, we don't want that. We like Generation X because they're crazy. We like them. So you've kind of got, it's almost like the millennials have just been bypassed because they're just not effective. The women generally, and I'm generalizing here, but generally they're struggling with femininity. The men are struggling with their masculinity. Whereas you look at Generation Z and they're all in the gym, you know. So I think that's what's going to drive everything forward. But as an adult, I'm kind of like, right, well, I'm responsible for my kingdom, my sphere. So I have to try and rectify things. And I quite often think that, what do we do? Do we like take over a local council? Is that what
So
we
I think
do?
it's coming to that stage. We've got a council issue where we are. And funny enough, I saw a Facebook post from one of the guys there saying, look, they're not doing the local newsletter. It sounds small stuff, but you can see what's going on. And this council said they're not paying for this now. This council's not saying. And this is about the 86 trillionth message, I might be exaggerating slightly, that I've seen from people locally. So I'm just going to say, let's set up a parallel council. Let's do it. Let's set up a parallel council. Who's going to stop us? As long as we don't break law, we can do whatever we want. And it can reach that stage. But you've got the guys, and I think it's Thetford, who've taken over their council, done an incredible job. It is going to come to that. It'd be lovely if we could do everything according to the rule of law to the nth degree. But actually, we've got to do what we've got to do. There comes a time when you say, are we going to allow these people who are damaging, destroying, they're committing treason? They are committing treason. Are we going to allow that to continue? Or are we justified now to step in and say, you're out of office, we're coming in, we're going to hold local elections because we freaking well can. And we're going to make sure that we get the right people in who are actually going to make a change. I mean, the local school, I speak to the deputy head. They've got no money. They haven't got anything. The teachers are they're ripping their hair out. They don't know what to do. And most of these teachers are actually wonderful people. And I complain regularly because my son pushes back against the system. I get a lot of phone calls and I say, look, the education system that we've got is not built to aid the children at all. It's to bring out drones. We know that. We've seen that. They're becoming indoctrinated. Long gone are the classics and other subjects that we used to have. It's all about science and maths, the STEM subjects. And for those students that aren't that way inclined, or someone like my son who's not built to sit on his ass for 6 hours saying nothing, doing nothing but just writing down. He's not built that way. What do you expect him to do? And they don't have the answers. They're pissed off. They know the system around them doesn't work for the children, but they're passionate about helping children. I think that's something we've all got to remember. The majority of teachers, actually, they do want to help children. But our entire education system needs turning around. The only way a central government is any good at the moment is if they come in as a transitionary government to start the decentralisation or the devolution of the government and power structures, feed that back to the people, start the tribunals. We do need a central government in terms of our foreign affairs and relationships and where the military is concerned. But outside of that, we want to see all the power going back to local town, parish, district councils, taking it away from the central government. I want to see council tax and whatever it is, that all needs to overhaul. There's so much we need to do. But first off, we need to take control. Now, until the people are ready to step up and do that, stop wasting your time sitting on Twitter moaning if you're not achieving anything else, i.e. getting on and building the new, because we're applying pressure, we're applying pressure, we're applying pressure. And you can watch these local council meetings where the freedom lovers are turning up, and these councillors don't know how to cope. They do not know how to cope. Some of them are running and hiding in back rooms, and I kid you not, they're hiding in back rooms, or they're trying to ban the public from attending, which is actually they're not allowed to do. So we can see the old is crumbling. And then again, I pose the question, are you going to wait for somebody else to come in and fill the boots and do what they want, or are you going to step up and do what we need as we the people of this country? The choice is down to us, but for those that don't step up, don't complain if things don't go your way.
Yeah, I've spent most of my life working as a musician, as you might be able to tell. And music journalists are they're like really arrogant groupies. They really want to be in the band, but they're not good enough to be in the band, so they write about it instead. Politicians and councillors, the majority of them are a little bit like that. They're not really good enough to be important or good at anything else, so they go into politics, and it's very self-serving. I think, the Jolly Heretic, Ed, coined an excellent phrase a few years ago, because the IQ level of our politicians is going through the floor. I mean, they're really not very bright at all. There are some exceptions. I'd say that you could probably take 30 or 40 of them are really incredibly bright. And he nicknamed it the Rayner effect, after Angela Rayner, which I think is absolutely true. A lot of them are as, and I don't mean to be cruel, but a lot of them are as thick as mints. And they shouldn't be there. In the 1970s, Parliament was full of Lee Andersons. People who had actually worked on the floor, saw the problems in their local areas and wanted to help. And as the 70s kind of gave way, it's just become more and more self-serving. And there's a lot of talk that we have issues with, let's just be polite and say, male prostitution within our political class. And there's rumors that Thatcher made deals with them all to kind of brush it under the carpet to allow for things to go through. And I think that rot has kind of set a precedent. And, I think it's worse than that, allegedly. But I think we need, there's never, and I've been saying this for years, never, ever has there been such a populace ruled by such an unworthy few. There are literally no capable men left in the royal court. And I don't think any of them, particularly, let's just take England, none of them, well, very few of them deserve to be called Englishmen. Very few of them deserve to be even classed as British. They're not worthy of that title. They're certainly not worthy to stand in those halls and dictate to this nation. They're just beyond, they're morally depraved. They are financially dubious and corrupt. And they are spiritually empty, most of them. And I do not think that they should be allowed to stand in that building with that office and with those sacred titles and dictate policy to us. It's just
gone are the days, I think, when a lot of these guys, first and foremost, see these types of roles as an honor to serve their country, as an honor to represent the people of this country. That is what it boils down to. And I cannot think of one who throughout I felt has that attitude, has that approach, has that genuine, authentic desire to serve their country. They're there to serve themselves or another. And I think that's what we're seeing now is how clear that is. And I'm taking this back even down to town parish council level. There are some people there that are utterly self-serving. What we need to see happen is people step forward who will genuinely see this as an honour to serve their country, to do what's best for their fellow man, who are passionate about taking care of people and passionate about taking care of the country. And there are I can't even think of any who fill me with that feeling that they're genuinely and authentically there for those reasons. And that's that's the bottom line. That is the bottom line. Get rid of the people there who are self-serving or serving another, effectively treason, and get the people in who will see it as a genuine honour to serve their country and represent the people of this country. Outside of that, they shouldn't be there.
Well,
shouldn't be there at all.
I mean, that's why they hate nationalism.
Yeah.
Because it is their antithesis. Because you would go, hang on, that's my nation. I can't do that. I never understood how. So my surname actually is English, right? These are my people. The surname roots we could trace all the way back. This is the Angles stronghold up here in the north. The surname means Angles. There are people in Germany who are literally called English because they're from the Angles region. It is an ancient surname, and there's something, and yes, it would be diluted through Irish and Dutch and Viking and all this other stuff, but that blood runs. There's something in me that means I can't leave this region, and I've been offered jobs all over the world and just thought I can't leave my people, right? And I always thought, well, surely if you're the monarch or you're the prime minister, you would feel that these are your children, that you have to become the paternal protector of the nation and of the people. And what you see is that they have a compassion limitation. And I don't blame anyone for this, because I've really sat and thought, can I extend my realm of compassionate thought to beyond my local sphere? Can I extend my realm of compassionate thought to a countrywide sphere? Can I do that? Because then you're getting into almost Buddha Christ levels of awareness, right? Where you're expanding, because you feel your mind expanding to take in more and more and more. Like I've sat in incredibly deep meditations and tried this. Most people can't get beyond their family and their local 10 friends.
Mm.
They cannot go beyond that. Their brain cannot envisage beyond that level. And it takes a rare individual, it takes an Alfred, it takes an Ethelred, it takes a George the farmer to get their mind that wide that, hang on, these are my people. And whilst I'm not looking for the ideal or the perfect, I'm looking for the least worst condition for them to live in.
Yeah.
Because there is no ideal. It does not exist. That's children. It's naive. Get out of that. It doesn't exist. Okay. That is a child's thing. The world is not set up to function on ideals, or there would be no heroism. There would be no ability to achieve greatness. It just would not exist. What you're looking for is least worst, because that is the way the world is made. It is the inverse of righteous principles, precisely so you can determine your character. Because if you can't determine your character, you can't have spiritual enlightenment, you can't ascend, you can't return home, right? So what we're looking for is people who understand that actually we just need the least worst set of circumstances for my people to thrive in as individual beings. And I've really dug into this idea of English sovereignty. And I don't mean this to denigrate any other nation, whether it's Scottish or Welsh and I'm genetically 50% Irish, but I'm English, and I cannot fathom what any other person from any other nation truly thinks or feels, because I'm not them. And I used to think I had a lot in common with the Irish until I sat in a bar with a young Irishman recently, and I realized I know nothing about the Irish. I'm English through and through. I'm completely English, apart from maybe the ability to talk off the cuff. The gift of the gab, right? I think that's what the big thing that I inherited from the Irish, that and the music. But it's this thing of English sovereignty. And I'm sitting there thinking, how can I explain this? It's not individualism. It's not me. I'm protecting me. It's this thing of we're all sovereign. And what happens is it's like, and I was looking at the bridges on the Derwent Walk. We have this old railway track that used to run from my hometown in Consett, where we used to make all the steel. And it ran like 15, 16 miles down to the docks in Newcastle. And they turned it into a walk. Now I'm old enough to remember the railway being there, but they turned it into like a nature walk. But all the bridges are still there, and these bridges are beautiful. And we even have the Causey Arch just up here. You've got no idea where I'm pointing to, but it's just up there. Trust me. And it's the first coal railway bridge in the world. Okay, and I don't think people realize that this nation here, the north of England, built the world. Not only did we have the steam engines, but we had the coal and the network and the shipping network. It came from the north. The north was the global powerhouse. And they kind of want the northerners to forget about that, because if we really get a hold of that pride, they're in trouble. So these bridges, they have a keystone. And each stone is individual. It's carved. It's in its own pocket. And it pushes against. And it's that keeps the bridge. That's English sovereignty. Each man is a king, and he takes the kingdom within and he expands it outwards, and he pushes against the other kingdom. But in doing that, they create a stability. And he knows, well, that's his kingdom. I can't invade that. The Englishman's home is his castle, right? This is English sovereignty. So you get this thing where actually, if every Englishman goes, hold on, this is mine. And the northern translation, because that's the southern translation, the northern translation is the Englishman is the sheriff in his hometown. So you take care of your environment, right? If everyone understood that, and they would go, hang on, no, this can't happen. I can't allow that. But also, I'm not going to infringe on this man. That's why you don't invade personal space, right? Because it's this sovereignty. But you then expand that to the family unit, you expand that to the community unit, and suddenly you have stability, because each kingdom buttresses up against the next one. And this is what we've lost. We've lost this English sovereignty. It's like, I remember being told a story at school by a teacher. There was a boy in the class who was very much a gentleman, and he would always open the door and he would carry the teacher's books. And the local ruffian in the class made a comment one day to this lad about him being soft, And anyway, when they came into school the next day, there's the local ruffian with a black eye. Because the boy just went up and clocked him. And that was, you read Dickens. Which Dickens is it? Where the young guy goes to London. Can't remember. No, can't think. It'll come back later. And somebody insults someone's honor. I don't think even the person was present. Someone insults someone's honor in a pub. That great English institution. The guy jumps up and he's going to have him, because he's insulted somebody's honor who he knows, and he knows that it's unjust. And we've lost that vibrancy. We've even had, English Christianity was always incredibly robust, like very robust. It was strong. And it's been wilted down to the mealy-mouthed, pencil-necked vicar with cucumber sandwiches, who's just not afraid. He's frightened of everything. And that wasn't what it was. It was here is my my bow, my flaming sword. I will march forward on this path. And that's kind of disappeared. And I think we need to pull this back. And I do think once that flame ignites, you'll then see people taking over the local councils. And I'm positive there's law to support it, because I'm sure there is a law in English that says that if the law is unjust, it is unjust to follow that law.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
this is the same thing with the fact that they're committing treason at the moment. For a lot of us to break the law is incredibly hard to do, because we are really good at following rules in this country overall. We are generally rule keepers. We don't tend to massively break the rules. And we're going to have to break some rules. And we have every right with which to do that, because our country is under attack. Our country is having treason, committed against us by those in power. it is that line. When is enough enough? When is it that we can't allow them to keep breaking rules? I mean, just look at what's happening on in terms of the illegal immigrants, for example, where our country's being invaded by foreign entities who we don't know how much they want to or do not want to harm us. But really, the government should be dealing with that, and they're not. They're letting it, if anything, they're supporting it. Let's be honest.
Yes.
They're committing treason. They've committed crimes against humanity. I do believe some have committed high treason. So, at what point do we say, okay, we are actually well within our rights, our natural rights, to stand up and say, no, remove them from power and take over? It's coming. It's going to happen one way or the other, I think. And it is coming. But going back to your point about, no, it's gone. It'll come back to me. It happens to a brain at my age.
Yeah, I
Things
think
go in and they go straight out.
it happens with me. I walk in a room and just think, why why am I here?
Yeah.
So I think you talk about the treason. We've sold a lot of our industry to China. And Maggie Thatcher got blamed for shutting down the steelworks and things like that. Now I had family who worked in the steelworks from the 60s onwards. In the 1960s, to go all the way back, 1950, when the embargo was placed on the Chinese government globally, a group of English businessmen formed a consortium called the 48 Group Club, who essentially became fundraisers for the Chinese government, circumventing the international blockade to China. And they made sure that there was constant money flowing towards Mao. So the Red Revolution was funded by the British. Then in the 60s, they gatewayed that into the United States. Wilson was training the Chinese on how to make steel like us. And Wilson sent money to Mao for the Red Revolution. He wanted the UK to follow Mao's blueprint. So we were training them. My second cousin, or my great cousin, or whatever he is, he trained the Chinese workers on how to make steel the British way. I had family members who worked in the administrative office in the 1970s. So before Maggie was prime minister, it was already sold. It was already shut down. We were shutting it down long before she got in. It was a done deal. The penalty clauses are so huge, you cannot back out. Right. So a lot of things got kind of heaped on her. I'm not sure she was to blame for everything. Some of it she might have been. But I don't think that one in particular she was to blame for. So this thing of selling the industries out, that to me is treason. I think anything that devalues or puts your own people at such a disadvantage is treason. And I always remember the story of Sussex, Lord Sussex, who lost one of the principalities in France. And Lord Sussex was a very good friend of the king. So you go back to like the Plantagenets here. And the king tried to get him off the hook by banishing him to France, exiling him to France. And off he goes. He gets on the boat at Dover and he's accosted by a division of the military, and they basically execute him on the deck of the ship. And that's how we used to deal with just administrative failure, let alone treason, right? So I think we fell a long way from that. We have a perfectly good tower in London that's going to waste. I don't see why we shouldn't start using it, but I think it'll come. I think there will be arrests for treason.
Yeah.
I don't want to go as far to say that we execute people. I think that needs. I do believe in the death penalty, but for incredibly rare, extreme cases of clear-cut murder and rape. But I do think there will be this awakening within the English in the next handful of years. But I think we have to go through a process of tyranny. So I don't think the Conservatives are going to win the next election. I don't think Reform are going to win anything. But I think the majority that Labour get will be so low. It'll be the lowest voted for government in English history.
I don't think we'll get to the next election.
Well, so that's
I think something's going to happen before then.
That's my other thing.
I think something will happen before then.
Yeah. Well, Schwab said this is the last year of elections. And if you look at the stuff that people are pulling, let's just take Humza as an example. What he's doing is so stupid. The electorate do not like him. That you go, well, if elections are a popularity contest, you're going to lose. So you're either stupid or you know the fix is in.
Yeah.
And if you look at how they're going on in America, I think they will do everything they can to not legitimize that election. They will not recognize it. They will not. I don't think there will be a peaceful transition of power. I think America
I
would
think Trump will
cancel
be
the
back
election.
before
Yeah,
then.
I think America would cancel the election if they didn't have the Second Amendment. It's my honest
I
opinion.
think Trump will be back before then. I've got my own predictions on how things are going to roll out. But going back to my original point when I said that I've been monitoring this stuff for many, 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 many years, and you start to work with patterns and you start to see things shifting and changing. And based on hints he's dropped and what we're seeing unravel right now, I don't think we'll make it through to the end of the year without some form of revolution in the US and the UK. And thus, if those go, everything else will follow suit. That's my personal prediction. That's something I've been working with for several years now. I think that there won't be traditional general elections happening this year. Something will give before then. Whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, I don't think we'll get to that point. Because I would stand as an MP right now, if I genuinely believe the elections would be coming, I'd be throwing everything at a campaign to stand as an MP. But I don't. I don't. And my gut feeling on this is incredibly strong. I think by end of summer, things will be kicking off here. And I think they'll call some of sort of a national emergency that they don't have to have the elections, which will just trigger further discomfort and reaction. And I think in the US, putting it out there at the moment, I think Trump might well go to jail. If he goes to jail, he's insulated, he's protected from what comes next. And I think at that point, we'll start seeing some pretty high level arrests take place within the Biden administration and further afield. So I've got my own theories, I've got my own thoughts on it. It's something I've been looking at for several years. That's how I think once the last election was stolen, I've been on this path and I still stand by it. I've still not seen anything that deters me from this path at the moment, which again, we can't do anything to control that. We can't do anything about that. What we can do, we should do, and we can get on and we can build anew.
Yeah.
And we can remove our government when the time comes. I just don't think that we've reached that point yet, but we're very, very close.
Yeah, I think once I'll come back to the Trump jail cell thing, because I think that would be brilliant. I think once the populace understand English law properly, because it's hidden, it's very much hidden, and you can see there's been lots of statutes, lots of acts, lots of precedents set. However, all you have to do is just remake a precedent. We could push it through if the will of the populace is enough. I think once people understand English law enough, and it's almost like there needs to be an awareness campaign. I know Neil Oliver had a guest on the other day who touched on this. Once more people understand, and you only need 30% to achieve that push forward.
Yeah.
Well, I think once that gets into the broad church, I think they're done. But Trump in jail, so I think Trump in jail would be rather marvelous because he'll stream from his cell.
Yeah.
They can't stop the guy, you know.
No, they can't. They're going to do everything they can, and I think, and you've got to also think about how the American people will respond if they jail Trump. I personally think that it's the best thing that can happen. We know that there needs to be some very high level arrests. And I think if he's insulated in prison, no fingers can be pointed. So I think that's where he'll end up going potentially. And I think it might be within the next 6 weeks. Could be today. I mean, he's pushing his luck, and you can see him doing it. He's like, come on then, do it. Go on, arrest me. So yeah, I'm not too worried about that. In terms of the UK, I don't even think it will come down to people understanding law. I think people will reach a point and it will take only something small. It'll only need to be something small. You
It's a
can feel
tinderbox,
the
yeah.
energy,
Yeah, you
David.
can. Yeah, you
You can feel the energy. We're on the precipice now of those of us that have been awake and aware for a number of years are going to reach a point where we said, okay, we're done. Enough now. Enough. And you watch people rise up in 1 or 2 towns and it's going to ripple. It's going to ripple and it's going to be quick. It's going to be really, really fast. This is almost an overnight situation is going to take place where people just stand up and they say, right, we're done. And I predict that happening, like I say, before the election, which at the moment they're suggesting is due to be in November, although there's been no confirmation properly still. I think it's going to be that quick. So I would push back against this taking years. I think it's going to be quite fast, and I think it's going to be this year.
Oh yeah, I think by 2030 the whole thing's done. I think we're back on
Oh
the
yeah,
gold standard. I think everything's done and dusted. But I think the CCP's gone. I think everything's done by 2030.
yeah.
It's just it'll start in the next sort of 12 to 18 months maximum 12 to 18 months, and you'll just see this wave across the West just shift like this.
Yeah.
And I think we just like, but you have to have in your head, you need to be planning, because all of these things of how we're going to go forward, how we're going to go, they will become mechanisms that actually need to be put in place quite quickly. So people do
And
need to
this is
kind of plan. Yeah,
exactly what I'm doing. This is
yeah.
exactly what comes next. So, what I've noticed over the last 4 years, and quite understandably, it's not a knock, but people are just eyes on the current situation, eyes on. That's what they're focused on. They want justice. They want, I completely get that. It's got to come. I totally get that. But eyes on this. What about what comes next? That's what nobody
Yeah,
else has
yeah,
been, or
yeah.
seemingly, I didn't see anyone else thinking about. And that's where there's a void. That's where there's a chasm. That's when things can go wrong, when you aren't already laying foundations about what can come next. And the idealistic leanings that should have, there's a philosophy behind this, and you've got to get people thinking about that philosophy. And going back to you and in terms of your castle and so forth, you're absolutely right. Once you are, so when people step into this, I say, don't look out, look within. Sort yourself out first, get
Mm-hmm.
yourself level, deal with your demons, deal with your issues, deal with what you need to deal with. And that is your shift in mentality as well, and your heart, your compassion, your empathy. So deal with those things first. Then once you've done that, then you've got the capacity to look outside of that. So you look at your family, you look at your friends, you look at your local community, you look at your colleagues, and you go from there. And you have to expand out. Now, so for me, I personally, based on my faith, based on my history, for me to just look at me and my family, I would feel that was selfish. I need to do that, and I've done that, but then I can't stop there.
Mm-hmm.
I have a
Yeah,
responsibility to those around me. I care about my fellow man. I want to help other people. And I have a duty, knowing what I know. I have been put here. God's put me in this position for a reason. And I have a duty to do what I can to help others. And I think a lot of other people are coming to that space, or have come to that space already, and they're understanding this isn't just about me. This isn't just about my family. This is about us all. We're all on the same freaking journey, whether we like it or not. And we can either step up and help each other and push back against those who truly do the evil things, or we can just sit here and just wait for someone to fix it. And what are we achieving?
yeah.
We're not growing, we're not developing, we're not pushing our own philosophical boundaries by doing that. And I believe now is the time to do that. And if you've not already, now is the time. Even if it's just going down your spiritual journey, get started, because the sooner you deal with yourself and get your family sorted, then you've got the capacity to go out and help others. And we all need to be leaning in that direction.
Yeah, I've had a few people ask me, what do you think we should do? And I'll say the first thing you have to do is you have to check in spiritually,
Yeah.
because that's the wellspring. Everything comes from that. And that is actually the root of the English culture. People don't understand that the English culture is a divinely inspired culture.
Yeah.
Blake nailed it. I will not rest until Jerusalem is born in this green and pleasant land, is built in this green and pleasant land, right? The people do not understand the spiritual impulse of the English is to make the divine manifest in the physical world. Okay, that's why it's as beautiful as it is. Until recently, it was absolutely beautiful. And what they are is they are shadows within us that they become forms of inspiration, but those shadows are of our divine memory, right? We're creating what we remember into the physical world to beautify it in the way that we recognize from our inner realm. Okay. And people don't realize that, but once you connect with that wellspring, then your source of inspiration, the quality of your inspiration, everything changes. Boom. And you don't
Yeah.
need to go to church. You don't need to read the Bible. You can if you wish. If you want to take it that far and you ascend on that pathway, you can. The first thing you have to do is literally very, very simple, very sincerely, and somebody just go, okay, let's give this a go. And that's it. It's all you need to do. And then suddenly within about 3 months, your life will just start, you
Yeah.
start moving. And you go, oh, but
Yeah.
then your impulse, your instinct, the quality of it will shift. You'll go, oh, I can't
Yeah.
do that. I can't go out and take that line of cocaine tonight. I can't go out and get completely hammered. Something just moves in you and you go, ooh, okay. And your life will just move and you'll have a life of purpose, but it'll be divinely guided. And this is the thing with the laws. This is why you can't have excessive laws, because they remove the ability for the creator to influence you. So you're not operating at the divine will anymore. You're operating at the governmental will, the administrative will, which, if you like, is satanic. You're not operating, because if it's opposed to the creator, it can only be satanic. You're not operating at the divine will. This is why you cannot have excessive laws. You have to have, there's the three main laws, right? Breach of the peace, stealing, and murder. Everything should encompass within that. You cannot have this excessively detail-oriented system that we have now, because it robs people of their ability to follow their divine instinct. And it's not right. It's not right.
When people say to me, how do you get your ideas? Why do you do the things you do? Why, coming from him. I'm just the conduit. I'm just the person who's taking, his guidance and doing what instinctively feels right. It's got to come from the heart. It's got to come from the gut. For me, I believe, I'm led by the Holy Spirit, and that's how these kind of messages come to me. But I'm not here ever to suggest what anyone believes spiritually or otherwise. For me, that's my route, and my connection to God and my relationship with God that really kicked back in about 2016, changed my life. It changed my life. And I've got to say, please do investigate. Please do reach out to God. That's all you need to do. He's waiting for you. And once you do, you're absolutely right. It changes your life. And for me, it changed it so much for the better. And I am so inspired by him. I'm so guided by him. I'm so loved by him that I don't think I could do what I did with it or how I'm doing if it wasn't for him. But again, to each their own. I'm not going to sit here and tell people they have to, got to go a certain way with this. But I would absolutely agree that everybody should certainly investigate this and see what is resonating with them. I do read the Bible, but I'm very aware that I believe there are elements missing. Certain bits have been manipulated. I don't believe it is in its full form, but for me, I get something from it. But again, other people won't, and I'm not going to dictate to others or even suggest for a minute what they do. But do go on your spiritual journey. Do start investigating. Do start feeling your way. You will get communication. You will get something out of it, and it can take a little while. But once you learn how to listen, once you learn how to hear, it becomes very clear, and it's the most wonderful feeling. It is just so incredible when it happens. I think everyone should go that way and start looking into that if you haven't. Don't underestimate it. Even if you're a complete atheist, don't underestimate the process of trying to reach out to God. Just do it. Even if you feel stupid, just do it. And I'm really convinced you're going to get something out of it.
Yeah, I am too. All right, so we're coming to kind of the end. What's your superpower in this battle of good against evil? We're all X-Men. You're a catalyst. Wow, okay. I would agree.
I'm a catalyst.
Yeah, from what I've seen of you, I would agree. I'd absolutely agree. I think mine's talking. But yeah, all right. Okay.
No, I come in and I drop bombs. And I make things happen. And that's, I think, why he's put me here and why I've went through all the years of heck that I did for a number of years at the time before I found him. And I was thinking, what have I done to deserve this? I'm not that bad, but bomb after bomb after bomb was dropped on me. And I now am so grateful that he did. Not at the time. Like, at the time, I thought it was horrific. And things are incredibly difficult for me. But I still had the capacity to make things happen. It's always been something I've been able to do. And I now know he was almost training me for this moment. I'm incredibly tenacious. I don't back down from things. I'm a very hard worker. I'm very confident that I'm on the right track. And he's given me the tools over the years that I've learned so that I could step into this moment and I wouldn't, no hesitation, no pausing, no questioning myself. I could just go in and work my butt off and make stuff happen. And that's what I do, is I come in and I'm a catalyst. But it takes then teams of volunteers and wonderful people to take that and move it forward. And that's what we've seen happen as a result.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Okay, so before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you 10 quick fire questions. All right. So I've kind of been an insomniac for about 10 years, right? I really struggle sleeping for lots of variety of reasons. As a result, I've
Amazing.
been down every rabbit hole known to man. So I'm going to ask you 10 questions on various rabbit holes, and you can just give me your quick answer. Okay, moon landing, real or fake?
Fake.
JFK, mob or CIA?
I would say more likely CIA, but I'd throw maybe the Mossad into that as well.
All right, okay. Lizard people, real or fake?
I believe in non-humans. I don't know if lizard.
All right, okay. Is the Earth flat or round?
This is for a long time, I was a roundie and I'm moving towards more being a flatty. But again, you don't need to make a decision. If you're not sure, sit on the fence. And that's where I'm at.
All right, okay. Perhaps my favorite, Paul McCartney or Fall McCartney? Uh, which one did you say?
The second one.
Second one. Yeah, I happen to know the answer to that one.
Okay.
So Earth hollow or not?
I'm thinking more so again as time goes on, but I'm still slightly on the fence.
All right, okay. Atlantis real or not?
Again, I'm sitting on the fence. But whereas once I would have said no, now I'm like potentially, yeah.
We're all the sons of Apollo. Aliens real or not?
Again, your concept on aliens depends what you're thinking, but in terms of other beings, then yes.
Yeah. Tupac, alive or dead?
I think he's dead, but it wouldn't shock me if he turned around and turned up tomorrow,
Well, I
much
don't
like
think
Jeffrey
anybody
Epstein, for
would.
example.
Yeah, I don't think anything would shock anybody these days. Last one, ESP, real or not?
Yeah, I think it's real.
Yeah, yeah. All right, great. There you go. Well, it's been an
Thank
absolute
you.
pleasure. Thank you. It's nice to just talk to people. I think just pull people together a little bit. I think that's what I see in the US scene. They congregated, and I think we need to kind of do the same. You do see it. You're seeing it like the Lotus Eaters crowd, and there is a thing kind of forming. But I think some of the satellite people also need to kind of come together.
I'd have agreed with that until the Israeli-Palestine situation. I think that's dropped a bomb on things. But I do think everything has to fall apart, very much including the freedom movement, in order for us to come through the other side. Because it's going to make you question everything from every point of view, and we all need to do that. So, again, I'm loving what I'm seeing. I'm still not panicking. Nothing's stressing me out. I think everything's going as it needs to, and I think what comes next is going to be beautiful.
All right, is that your final words? All right, great. Message of hope. Excellent. Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you.